Okay, what we're going to take a look at now is how we can use a reusable text input and get rid of all of this boilerplate code and turn it into one-liners inside our register components template. So what we'll do for this, we'll go to Solution Explorer, and what we'll do inside our app, we'll create a new folder and we'll call it _forms. And by the way, this is just very simple file and folder organization I'm using here. Angular doesn't care how we organize our files, and this really comes down to developer choice. And you may not like this way of organizing the files and folders, and that's absolutely fine. It's your choice. I'm not saying you have to do it this way. This is just the way that I've chosen for this course because it's super simple to understand what's going on, and it makes it quite easy to find our files if we're going through the file system. But it doesn't have to be this way. But this is a way of organizing what's going on here. So what we're going to do inside the forms folder, I'm just going to go to the terminal once again, and we'll add, or I'll use a third tab so I don't have to stop anything. And I'll cd into the client, into the source, into the app, and into that forms folder we've just created. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new component. And we'll say ngc, and we'll call it text-inputs, and we'll skip the tests and press return. And that's gone ahead and created that. So let's open up our new text input component. And what we want to do here is we want to implement a control value accessor. And if I take a look at my form, the register component, then what we have inside here is controls. We've got form controls. And what we want to do is access this form control inside our text input. So whichever form control that we're accessing on our template via these form controls, we want to access these controls. So what we use for this, instead of implementing on init, we're going to implement the control value accessor. And what this does, this defines an interface that acts as a bridge between the Angular Forms API and the native element in the DOM. Cool. So what it means by the native element in the DOM, let's just go to our register component templates. This is our native form control in the DOM, and this is what we want to get access to. So inside here, we'll remove the ng on init because we're no longer implementing the on init interface. And we'll put our cursor inside the text input component, and we're going to implement the interface control value accessor. Now, this has 3 required methods, and the fourth one here is not a required method, so we do not need to implement that method. Now, what we could do with these methods is basically nothing. We can remove the code from here, and we'll just remove the throw new errors, because what we're going to do in the template is simply going to pass through to these methods, and it doesn't really make any difference if we enter something in here or we don't. These functions are going to be created by the control value accessor itself, and it's going to write the values, it's going to register the changes, and it's going to register untouched, regardless of whether we put anything in here or we don't. These are just required methods that have to be inside this component. Now, what we're also going to do is we're going to add some input properties here, and what we want to pass through here is a label, and that's going to be of type string. And because it's a text input, we also want to get its type as well, so that we can specify what type of field this is. And what we'll do is we'll give this an initial property of text, and that's going to be its default. And if we want to override this, then we'll simply pass in a type input property to our control as well. Now, what we need to do inside this component is we need to inject the control into the constructor of this component. And what we're going to put inside here is a special decorator called self. And this is just the type of the self metadata, self decorator, and metadata. Great. But what Angular will do when it's looking at dependency injection, it's going to look inside the hierarchy of things that it can inject. If there's an injector that matches this, that it's already got inside its dependency injection container, then it's going to attempt to reuse that one. We don't want that to happen for this. We want our text input components to be self-contained, and we don't want Angular to try and fetch us another instance of what we're doing here. We always want this to be self-contained, and this decorator ensures that Angular will always inject what we're doing here locally into this component. And what we need inside here, we need to specify public, and we're going to specify ng control. And this is going to be a type of ng control, which is the base class that all form control directives extend. So we want this. We want to inject this inside here. And what we want to do inside the constructor is say list.ng control, and we want to say value accessor equals this. And by adding this, now we've got access to our control inside this component when we use it inside our register form. So the beautiful thing about this, let's open up the text input component HTML. And what we'll do is we'll go to our register component HTML, and we'll copy one of these form groups into the clipboard, and we'll paste it inside our text input component. And what we could do here now, for the class that's invalid, we'll just remove all of this. And inside here, what we want to do is access the control and see if it's been touched. And we'll check the control and see if it's invalid. And this is now going to work for every single input when we start using this. And we want to change the type here, and we'll use interpolation for this, and we'll get the type from our components. The class stays the same. These are all going to be form controls. And then instead of form control name, what we use is the inputs of form control, and then we'll say that this is equal to ngcontrol.control. And then the placeholder, we're just going to set this to the label that we pass in as an input property. So we'll say label inside there. And that takes care of our input now, and this is going to be used for every single text input that we use. Now we still need to check the errors, and we still need to add conditionals for this. But what we'll do inside this text input component is we'll just use conditionals again, and let's remove all of this. We'll still have an ng if statement, but what we'll do, we'll say ng control, and we'll say control.errors, and we'll keep the class of invalid feedback, and we'll add an optional chaining to the errors, and we'll specify required as the type of error that we're looking for here. And then what we can do is say please enter a, and then we'll just pass in the label so that we use this for any type of control. And let's just remove this second one, and I'm just going to copy this line down a few times. So what we want to do is say for the second one, we want to say errors and min length. Don't forget the capitalization needs to remain the same. And then what we'll do for this one, and let's move this down, what we'll do is we'll say label, and we'll say must be at least. And then what we can do is get access to our ng control. We can say control.errors.min length, and then we can add square brackets, and we can access the required length property inside there. Now casing is important here. I've got min length all in lowercase and required length in camel case. Yes, I appreciate this is not ideal, but we're not working with our own code here. This is what we get from Angular. And think about all of the typing that we're going to save ourselves when we see how we actually use this. So what we'll do for the next one is we'll say that this one is our max length. And what I'll do is I'll just move this down as well. And we'll just copy this line and overwrite this, and we'll just say at most, and we'll say max length, and the required length property is the same. And then what we need to do is check for our custom validator, and we'll use isMatching. And let's move this down again. And what we'll do for this one is we'll just say passwords do not match. So it's a bit of work to get to this stage, but what we have now is awesome, because let's go back to our register component, and what we're going to do is take out all of this code, all of our form groups. We're going to delete all of these, and what we're going to put in their place is @text inputs, and each one of these is going to take a form control, and we're going to set the form control to register form .controls, and this first one we'll put in square brackets, and this is going to be for our username, and we'll also give it a label, and we'll specify single quotes, and then because we're passing this as a property, we then need to specify double quotes, and we'll say username. And then what we can do is just copy this line down 2 more times, and the second one is going to be our password, and we have a label of username, and we'll also need to give this a type so that we give it the password property, and again we'll need to use single quotes and then double quotes and specify the type is password. And then we can specify confirm password, and the label in this case for the second one needs to be password, and the label in the third one needs to be confirm password. And again, we'll just copy this type and put it inside here. I'll try and reformat to tidy things up, but the formatter in here is not brilliant. But there we go. Now what we've got is significantly less code, but we should retain all of the functionality that we had before. And I'm just going to tidy this stuff up. And we've saved ourselves a huge amount of code by doing it this way. So let's make sure we've not lost any functionality. Let's click on register. If I click on username and click out, we still get the validation, and we can see all of our required validators are working. If I start typing, I can see the password must be at least 4. I should add the word characters onto that, but then the validator goes away, keep typing, and we've got password bit must be at most 8. And again, I should go back and add characters, but let's just check the functionality first of all. And if I say confirm password, then we can see passwords do not match. If I keep typing until we do get a match, then we can see that the validator goes away. Our form is still invalid, and let's just make sure that when we do type in a username, then our form status is valid. So we now have a reusable text input that's going to save us a lot of typing, because all of our fields now have validation automatically applied to them, they're styled correctly, and our workload has gone right down. Cool. What we'll take a look at next is reducing our code a little bit further, and we'll take a look at using the form builder service we get from Angular.